And I suspect a few more are going to hop on as time continues, but since we are all on, it might be great to just do a little bit of a go-around. I was thinking everyone, I mean, it's been 2 months into the summer for some of us and just a month for others, but Lauren has a wealth of knowledge on food systems, everything from changing policy to actually teaching applied student research courses. And as you see on the Toronto Food Policy Council website, has written a lot about everything from waste to community gardens to how to get healthy food into convenience stores. So she's just like a treasure chest of exciting things to talk about. So, and Lauren thought it would be most useful to do a bit of a Q&A today. So I thought it'd be great to do a go around and just have people talk a little bit about where they're from and what's going on campus, but also maybe some of the big questions that are coming up in your work this summer, whether it be on campus or just about the food movement in general. So Lauren, I don't know, do you want to start with yourself about where you're coming from, and then we can kind of go around with the campuses?
Sure. I won't do a long introduction right now. I'd rather save time just to have a conversation and Q&A with all of you and hear about your work and spark a conversation and discussion that way. So as Sarah mentioned, I work with the Toronto Food Policy Council and the Toronto Food Strategy team at Toronto Public Health. So my position is within the City of Toronto, and I was just thinking about this, and I feel like actually my work is probably a lot like the work that you're doing on campuses across the country, because like you, I'm working with a city, you're working with a campus, community, and there are so many opportunities in that work. There's so many opportunities to make food relevant and connect food into conversations that are happening in Toronto around city building, around strong and healthy neighborhoods, around local food procurement, around how to citizen engagement and participatory governance, food sovereignty, you name it. There are opportunities to connect into conversations. My work really spans, like Sarah mentioned, the spectrum from access to agriculture, so we can talk about that a little bit more. On the personal front, I've been doing this work for about 20 years, which is very exciting. I've loved thinking about food security and food systems for that long. It's a topic that engaged me when I was at university at Trent, and has kept me engaged this whole entire time. And I started off working, actually volunteering at a food bank, and I was so horrified by the level of poverty that I saw there, and also the sort of injustice and the way that people were treated and the kind of food that was provided, that it really got me going on working on the food system at the campus level and in the community of Peterborough. So I have probably a similar story to all of you in terms of how my interest in this got piqued for the first time. And now I've been at the city for about 4 years, me and Rob Ford. And I'm a mom of 2 boys, 11 and 7, and just about to go off on a fabulous sea kayaking adventure, so I'm excited about that too. So anyways, looking forward to hearing and chatting with you more over the next hour or so.
Awesome. Well, if you need a weather report, we've got coast to coast, so
yeah, exactly.
About the waves. So why don't we start in the east, and we'll just go across my screen here. So with Jada, just explaining where you're at, maybe some questions or yeah, some things that you're finding with the food system.
Cool. So right now, just for your information, I'm in a public place, so I won't be able to talk as much as I would or as loud as I can because my internet is weird. But I'm at Dalhousie, and right now I'm working on making food policy within our student union. So I'd love to hear more information about establishing food boards and food coordinator positions within council, and how it operates and what's like the best way to put forward questions like self-op and um, switching from like towards local food and like purchasing power and everything like that in our student council, and then how to eventually make waves to the university as a whole.
Great.
Good questions. Thanks, Jada. All right, so maybe we'll hop over to SaneFX with Maggie. Be great.
All right. So I guess the two things that I've been working on are having like a harvest party for Frosh Week and working with Sodexo to measure food waste. And so I guess some of the things that kind of I've run into that I have questions about are how to hold institutions accountable for their policies. Like with the Students' Union and the Frosh Week events, they claim to have like a responsibility, like environmental responsibility and whatnot, but then that doesn't necessarily come through. And so kind of working with them to help them to achieve those policies and goals that they have, and kind of using that to gain leverage. And similar with Sodexo, they have like the kind of wider organization of Sodexo has a lot of commitments to sustainability, but it doesn't necessarily come through at the smaller branches, and using those as ways to leverage support for the programs that the CFSG is working on.
Great questions. What does sustainable mean for certain events, and how do you hold that accountable in a productive way? Okay, welcome, Julie.
Hello.
Hello. We're going east to west, and we just landed in Manitoba. Are you okay to do a brief introduction of what's going on campus, and maybe some of the questions you have? We have Lauren Baker with us, who has a wide range of expertise from policy to waste to working within government and creating positions. So yeah, just any questions that you have and things that are going on at the University of Manitoba.
Yeah, definitely. So we just finished some data collection for the baseline assessment for our local food system, and so that was pretty big, and it's part of a larger project called the Campus Food Strategy. And so I'm really interested in how we can take some of the information that we've collected and use it for some positive policy changes on campus, and what that really looks like moving forward. That's probably the biggest thing that we've been doing on right now. And then in addition to some workshops, our campus garden has some canning workshops coming up, and it's partnered with the biological sciences to have some planting and growing workshops. So a lot of different student engagement activities happening as well. And then potentially formalizing applied student research through another department on campus. So lots of little things, and just trying to figure out how to ensure that we're not missing any opportunities moving forward. So, oh yes, and I'm Julie. I don't think I introduced myself. Yeah, but I'm actually in Victoria right now. So I attend the University of Manitoba, but I'm enjoying the beautiful sun-shining weather in Victoria.
Very nice. You fooled me. Well, great to hear from you, Julie. And it sounds like lots of policy things going on
Yes.
on campuses. Yeah. Great. So I think there'll be lots of generative discussion. We've just been joined by Chris from Carleton University in Ottawa. So Chris, we're just going around and saying a little bit about what's going on campus, and what questions you have, either personally or for campus, about the food system, whether it has to do with policy or just general questions.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear me. This is on my cell phone because I couldn't seem to find a way to connect online because I'm blocked through the university server for some reason. But anyways, yeah. Um, so can you hear me? Can
Yes.
you hear me okay?
Oh yeah, you're great.
Okay, great. So excellent. Um, So basically, the questions that I have coming from Carlton is how we can think of hmm, really making a bigger splash in the food scene here in Ottawa. Some of the linkages that we've been trying to establish have been with Just Food Ottawa, which is all about producing, gardening, as well as sourcing foods from a local food hub. And today I was just online. I found another spot where all of the real food in Ottawa is cataloged. Someone's gone to the work of actually documenting all of the local food establishments around in Ottawa, and so that's another resource to draw upon. And I guess just more broadly, for me, the question of what is local. Certainly, in terms of the Ontario legislation, it's been local is within all of Ontario, but how have people gone at those policy battles is one of my questions, and how do we make it an even closer, proximate definition of local?
Take care of yourself.
Okay,
Put some
good
ice on.
questions. And Lauren, I've jotted a bunch of these down, so hopefully you're not feeling too overwhelmed by the amount of questions. Are we good to keep on going through, or would you like to take a
Oh
breather?
yeah, no,
That's
let's
good.
keep going. If there are more introductions, I've been taking notes too, so I've got
Okay.
a running list. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great. So we've got two more in British Columbia. So Jamie, who's based in North Vancouver, or Burnaby, but goes to school at Capilano in North Vancouver.
Hello, my camera's not on just because I wanted to save my internet for audio and watching the videos. I am currently working on planning a farmers market, which will be in September, approximately the 10th, and also the food and waste engagement here on campus. So I want to raise awareness within the student body along with the instructors, and I have to connect with a couple of them to possibly put in food waste aspects and kind of engagement within the curriculum. Any ways of implementing food waste as part of the curriculum at a post-secondary level, which is a pretty specific question, actually.
All right, thank you, Jamie. So yeah, it seems like policy and waste are the two big themes coming out. So finally, we'll head up to Prince George, British Columbia, and I think it's just Tori there.
So hi guys, my name's Tori. I'm from Prince George, so the University of British Columbia. Usually Melanie's with me, she's the other coordinator. But some stuff that we're working on campus right now is we're just doing a lot of work with Chartwells right now to try and launch off a food waste and redistribution project, and also community kitchen, as well as like trying to beef up our food bank and just work on a lot of policy within the food system. So some questions that I have are basically surrounding the food and safety aspect of reusing waste and what other campuses have used or what's familiar, like time limits, stuff like that. Is it common that people are reusing their waste once it's out of the cafeteria? And also kind of the same thing that somebody said earlier, just trying to, how do we hold the university accountable for what they promised in the beginning? Because we were supposed to do a lot of things and we don't know if we're going to be able to do them now, but there were promises made, and just how to go around that nicely.
All right. Well, thank you guys, everyone, so much, and hopefully this can be a fluid conversation. So, Jamie, feel free to speak up if you've got questions, and everyone else, if you just want to raise your hand if things do come up. But Lauren, I'll pass it off to you, and I'll mute myself as I take notes. But let me know if you need any extra facilitation or help.
Okay. Well, there's lots of great stuff here. So if I don't address something that you really want addressed, why don't you chime in and we'll make this more of a conversation. Maybe we should start with this accountability issue. I don't know. What do you guys think? It seems like it was a theme throughout. And for me, it's kind of two sides of the coin. One is how do we hold institutions accountable for the promises that they made? And Tori, you were the last one who said that. And how do we do that nicely? I like that, or at least nicely at first, right? And then I think the other side of the coin is a lot of these institutions, so whether it's the food service company or the university itself, have really broad and forward-thinking targets and principles. If you look at their websites or whatever, so how do we see our work fitting into those or contributing to those? And how do we fit into the general priorities that institutions have or food service? So we could talk about that. So it's kind of two sides of the same coin, holding people accountable for the things that they've said that they've done and the broad, positive, forward-thinking principles that they put out there in the world. And then how do we fit the great work that each of you is doing and groups across the country are doing into the priorities of institutions? So, there's no easy answer for this, right? And it's hard work, and it's really about developing relationships, I think. But we do need to hold the institutions accountable, and part of this is about, I think, taking a note of when people make promises, and also making sure that those promises are sort of enshrined somehow in some kind of document that you can hold up and use, and basically say, like, well, since you said that you were going to do this, now's the time, and this is how we'd like to move forward. And the food waste is maybe a good way to think about that. I don't know if that's specific enough, or if people have made kind of set targets around food waste, but maybe we could talk about that specifically. So what are some of the accountability issues that you're having specifically? Because I think, we try and do this at the City of Toronto all the time, where we hold either other city staff accountable or City Council accountable for things that they've moved forward but aren't acting on. And part of, I think, the strategy that we use is to assume that it's going to happen and then move forward in that way. But also building, there's work to be done to build a rationale around why we would be moving forward, and linking the promise to other outcomes like cost savings or community engagement, student engagement, or academic outcomes, whatever they are. So I feel like it's a phased project, but why don't you give me some specific examples of where you're frustrated because the institution said that they would do something and you feel like it's not happening fast enough, or it's not happening at all.
So, this is me again. At the beginning of our RFP process for a new food service contract, one of the things that were promised from the university, as well as the people in ancillary services who are involved with the food services, was that CFSG would be able to sit on Chartwell's committee and be involved in the conversation around food, and be involved with just decisions and overall just updates. But since this summer and moving towards a new contract for September, a bunch of people from ancillary services, when we had a meeting with them, they said, you won't be on the food service committee because we want to have this committee just for Chartwells. If you want to talk to us, you can set up a meeting type thing. But the whole RFP process was based around us being on the committee. So we could hold them to all their other promises that they made. Because, I don't know, we're just trying to ensure that things get done how they said that they were going to get done, but we don't even know if we're going to be on the committee anymore.
Yeah, that's a great example, and absolutely you should be on the committee, and hopefully in the contract that's written that there'll be a place for you on the committee. And so do you have that that written in the contract?
The contract is still in the process of being rewritten and re-signed. So this has been since the beginning of April that they're rewriting and changing little things in the contract. So we have not been able to see the contract since we handed it to them in April.
So yeah, but you were at a meeting where this was discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And now you want to move forward with that. And I think that this is a great example of where you should really press for participation, because, and part of it is, again, so then the next step is creating that rationale for why, and maybe an email where you outline how, I don't know if you may have already done this, why your participation will be beneficial for them. So it will provide a liaison person that can be, liaise with your organization and the student body, the student groups on campus. Other campuses have set up similar advisory committees, and in this way can work cooperatively to meet objectives. So the responsibility isn't only going to be on the food service provider, but this responsibility is shared for meeting various objectives. You can coordinate better. So I would just put this, I don't know if you've done this, but put this together in an email and send it to the person who you held was in that initial conversation, and say, we're ready to move forward with this. We'd like to institutionalize it for September, whether the contract is signed or not, because we think it will have benefit for both parties. The students will feel more engaged and listened to and heard, and you'll be connected with us formally, so you don't have to figure out who to talk to on our side every time you want to share information. Okay. So I don't know what strategies you've used to date, but I would position it as like moving forward with this commitment to engage students on the committee. I know you've talked about a specific group, which I assume is your campus food group.
Yeah.
Right? So position it that way.
I think, yeah, we're going to try that, because I think the direction that we took it to begin with is a little too forward. We drafted up a TOR for the committee and everything already, because we assumed we'd be on it, so we were trying to get that done before. Mm-hmm. But we kind of went into the meeting assuming that we'd be on it, so we didn't have to explain why we'd be on it. So I think we'll have to do a little backtracking.
Well, I think you could put that in too. Say, we were disappointed to learn that we weren't, we assumed that we would be part of this committee because of the commitment that had been made. And so we were disappointed to learn that that wasn't the case, and we want to explore the options moving forward. We had already developed a terms of reference, which of course is, some kind of base, it's like a foundation to work from. It's a draft, right? And I would position it that way too. Mm-hmm. Draft for discussion. So, I think it's interesting because for them it's a fear-based, I think it's a fear-based response. Like, people are afraid of change. And already food services, because of your incredible work across the country, is having to adapt pretty rapidly their practices. And now it's not rapidly enough from your end, I'm sure, but from the way things happen with them, it probably feels really fast. But they see that this change is coming. You can be sure of that they are going to have to act. And if you can position yourselves as a group that will help them meet their targets, win over students, provide solutions and a pathway for the student voice to be heard, and recognize none of this is easy, right, either. But, you know, I think that this is what you can offer these committees. They don't have to make every decision with you in the room, right? But you're asking for some kind of participation in the decision-making process.
Yeah, I think that's probably the direction we need to take right now. Thank you very much
for big institutions, like a lot of the work that I do to move things forward, and you know, we just did strategic planning with our team and the food strategy, just trying to think of, you know, moving it forward. Our food strategy has been around for about 4 years and taking it to the next level. And a lot of that work is looking really closely at like the city's, what is the city's strategic plan? What are the strategic plans of each of, we have all these, you know, divisions across the city, parks, forestry and recreation, public health. What are their strategic plans, and how do our ideas and the work that we want to do support them to meet their strategic plan? And it sounds really simplistic, like we can do this and then you can check off that box and we can work together and make it happen. But, you know, there's sort of a two-way street there. You know, we want to use parks as public space for food, to animate really great food projects. That's what communities want to do. And we say we can help you navigate that kind of community side. We'll help you develop like food and parks policy that will satisfy the community, and the community will be happy with, and will make it clear for your staff in terms of making decisions about what happens in parks. So it's really about looking at those broad plans and fitting food in and your work into those. And I think in almost every case, whether it's food service or the university's strategic plan, your work is going to enhance that.
Great basis. That's fantastic. Any other thoughts there, questions that are sort of sticking points?
I'll just jump in with one other thing. I'm sure other people have questions, but just one quick thought about, you know, what you're all doing, because you are like thought leaders in all of this, and you're paving the way. So in the end, the policy, whatever policy it is, whether it's in the contract for food service or the university's strategic plan or a food strategy for the university, the policy is always going to follow the practice. Like what you're doing on the ground is going to outpace the policy every single time. So you want to have a balance in your work of, you know, showing, and this is why it's so great, all of you who do have this already. So I think it's like, you know, the natural way of working in food, right? Which is about celebration, fun, commensality, coming together and sharing food, as well as action on specific issues that are priorities for you, and then that policy making comes later to sort of institutionalize and embed these ideas within the institutional setting. But the majority of your work should be around, you know, setting that pace and doing cool things on the ground that will lead to policy change down the road. So what other, should we keep going on this theme, or should we move to another one?
Does everyone feel like they've got the ideas of how to adapt policy, or at least with committees? Any questions coming up from Dal or University of Manitoba? No, those were big spots.
Sorry, I was just muted. I think the what you said about really continuing to work on the ground and setting really good examples will eventually lead to kind of policy change and institutionalization that really resonated with me. I never thought about it in that way, because even with the drafting of the campus food strategy that we're moving forward with, we are really trying to take the university's strategic planning vocabulary and really incorporate it into some of our goals and objectives. But I guess 3 years ago we did a sustainability strategy, and it was a document that was full of ideas and recommendations, and then the document kind of just sat. There wasn't enough shared ownership. So I guess that's one of the things we're really trying to develop with the campus food strategy. So do you have any helpful hints or suggestions about how to really create shared ownership with the different stakeholders that would be involved in different aspects of food on campus?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because in my work in Toronto is a little unique actually in this area. In my work, I see all of these cities developing food strategies, and then they sort of languish either because they're tightly tied to a political regime, like a particular mayor, for example, or there just aren't any resources attached to them. And I use resources really widely. So, people don't feel like their work is part of implementing the food strategy, or that the food strategy enhances their work. So this is absolutely essential to think about as you're developing a strategy, because otherwise it just becomes, another report. Like we have lots of these that sit on the shelf. And I think, so part of what I've learned about the Toronto food strategy is that we took the approach here in Toronto of being less prescriptive in our actions and more the approach of articulating a way of working that would, like a food systems approach and way of working. So the Toronto Food Policy Council is a great example of that, and same with your campus food systems groups, where you're bringing different people together to think about collaboration, coordination, and doing things together and moving the issue forward, sort of leveraging support, but also showcasing the food issues on campus, and developing collective priorities so that you can have collective impact. And we really have used the same approach in Toronto, where we, in the end, are really opportunistic, and we work where there is a lot of momentum. And we try things. So we try to kind of prototype projects or like pilots, I guess, and then think about how we'll scale those up. So a great example is healthy corner stores. So this is addressing the very dynamic and diverse food retail environment in Toronto. And typically when we map food access across the city, we don't think of the tiny corner stores, but a lot of people rely on those corner stores. So then the question is, how do we make those corner stores more healthy? Well, of course, a small team of 5 people can have a very limited impact when you think of the network of thousands of corner stores across the city. And so we've done sort of a dual project of showcasing innovation and good practices, like the things people are doing right in greengrocers, and thinking about how we preserve existing greengrocers. But we've also thought about, what does it look like for a store owner to want to change and offer healthy food? And we provide things like signage for them, and access to fridge, and access to supply for healthy fresh fruit and vegetables. So I guess the answer to your question is to really think, how is the campus, how are different stakeholders on the campus, people on campus, going to work together to move the food systems challenges that you face forward? And you may have a set of to-dos on your list, action items, but really we want people to think about food every day when they're making decisions, not only checking off boxes on a list. And so what that means is a place to bring people together to have the conversation about food, and then making food relevant to those broader priorities. And I think also it means bringing a diverse set of resources to the table. And when you're developing the food strategy, thinking about, what are people going to bring to the table because this work supports the work that they're already doing. So whether it's at the curriculum level, developing courses, a lot of campuses want to do service learning courses now and have service learning opportunities, engaging wider community food organizations and food businesses in the conversation, campus planning, starting gardens, markets, all that kind of engagement work. And different people will bring different things to the table to accomplish the vision and the strategy, but to make the strategy less prescriptive and more geared towards galvanizing people to contribute to food systems reform as an ongoing process at the campus.
Thank you.
So are all of you doing food strategies as part of your work, or do you sort of do different things?
So I guess everyone will have a bit of a different answer.
Yeah.
It's completely campus-based and sort of where the traction is.
Good.
And one of the biggest things we found is our original goal with the project was to make transformative procurement shifts, and though that is happening, a lot of it is taking a cultural shift first. And so I loved how Julie was explaining her goal with the campus food strategy, but also working on creating workshops and canning, and that's part of her job description as well, as with everyone here does a bit of both.
Yeah, and I think that working at all those different levels, maybe it's not the best way of putting it, but doing workshops, working on strategy, working on specific initiatives are all important, because in the end you're building a movement. And I'm sure you've done this work together about what is your theory of change around how food systems reform happens on campus. And we have that same sort of theory of change at the Toronto Food Policy Council table, where we have to be really careful of being too reactive in a sense. We want to be proactive as well as reactive. So we of course are going to react to different city policies that impact the food system and impact food access across the city. Or we will be reactive to embed a food systems perspective into particular policy initiatives as they're being developed at the city. But we also want to be proactive. I mean, what do we want to see in the city on campuses in 5 years? Do you want to see a new urban farm, a garden? Do you want to see more kitchen space for your community kitchens, or some kind of social enterprise around food? And working, simultaneously and also really intentionally on being proactive and reactive. And I see some of this stuff around the procurement piece as being a bit, it's this both happening at the same time. Like you're reacting to a current context, which is like crappy food on campus. But so how can we also position that as being proactive? How can you demonstrate what good food means? What does it look like to have good food on the campus? To have really delicious meals that are locally sourced, that are shared in really nice ways instead of in a cafeteria, because then people will begin to see the difference, and you have something to shift towards. Because I think sometimes the institutions, especially a company like Sodexo, feels like there's never a finish line, which there isn't. But at least you can provide them some milestones along the way. Let's do a couple of events where you focus on really good food. Just do one substitution, all of your potatoes local. This is what it looks like to have local potatoes on campus. These really simple things, and all of you will be at different places, and your food service providers will be at different places with this. So some you have to start really at the beginning, and others you can be quite forward thinking with. But I just wanted to mention that sort of in our theory of change, we are really intentional about being both proactive and reactive, because you can be reactive forever, and it's not as much fun, frankly, to constantly be like, well, you forgot food, and you're doing this now, and you didn't consider how the food system intersects with the complete streets strategy that you're developing or whatever it is. So I think that's the power of what's happening on campuses, is that there are really exciting initiatives to shine a light on those and say, like, this is what we mean. See all this fantastic stuff happening that everyone's celebrating? This is what we mean when we're talking about food systems reform. This is what we want more of. And I think that you already have that balance.
Amazing, Lauren. I'm just going to, in the chat, Jada has a question and is in a loud environment. So just a question about food boards. What do you think of food values in our mission statements, and how helpful are they in terms of hiring, implementation, or the creation of food boards? Is that right, Jada?
Yeah, I see that question, and I think it is really important. I work with a lot of communities, especially smaller communities, to create food charters, for example, and then from there, often a food policy council or some kind of working group or board is created. And I think that this is really important work for that institutionalization. So to weave in food systems governance into the university governance one way or another. And often once you've done that work, then you can go and say, we've done this foundational work, we've brought people together, people have signed on and are committed to this, and now we're looking for resources. And I think, again, to be really open about the way that you think about resources. So I think it's crucial to have people like yourselves who are working on these issues, who are paid to work on these issues, and who are mobilizing volunteers and others to work on these issues and work on implementation. But there are other resources that we have at our disposal. And I came from the nonprofit world into the City of Toronto, and people always say to me in meetings that we don't have enough resources. And I just look and I think, oh my gosh, you have no idea. We have so many resources here at the City of Toronto. And if everybody dedicated 4% of their time toward working on some part of the food system as it relates to their work, we'd be so farther ahead, and so much farther ahead. So I do think that foundational work is important because it brings people into the conversation and it makes them see what they can contribute as part of their everyday work. And you need to be strategic too about who you bring on board, who can mobilize resources of whatever kind on campus, who's good at that. And it may be some of the unlikely players, like maybe it's grounds people, I don't know what the maintenance staff or something, who would be planning and involved in planning and the operations of the campus. They may have resources to bring to the table, as well as different faculties who are particularly interested in this work beyond the food service. So I'm sure you've all thought that through strategically. But I think that this is, again, an important element of the work. But it's this, creating food values and mission statements. I think to do it in the most fun and fun way possible, and to connect it with the sort of celebratory parts of building a healthy and sustainable food system on campus generates the best results. Because nobody wants to sit around for too long thinking through terms of reference and thinking through values and mission. Because in the end, I think we can agree quite quickly on what is important. There does have to be a process behind it, for sure, but to make it generative and fun is important.
I was wondering if you had an example mission statement or a food value statement that you've used in the past that could be helpful? And thanks for answering my question.
Well, I was involved with Sarah and others in the creation of the Campus Food Systems Charter, right?
The National Student Food Charter.
Yeah, which is a great example of that, I think. And then to either have individual campuses sign on to that or to create their own charters, I think is really exciting. And that was done, I mean, I know there was a ton of work involved on the back end and after, but basically it was done over a couple of days of people coming together and thinking really creatively about the language that was going to be used in that. So the good news is that lots of communities have done this. I just worked with Northumberland County, and I love their food charter. I mean, it's really basic, but it took, you know, it takes work to get there, right? You can't just, I mean, I think you could sign on to the broader charter, but you still need to bring people together and bring people along in that process, and that's what the food charter process does. It really helps people see, you know, farmers sitting together with students, sitting together with people interested in equity and access, and professors and people interested on the curriculum side as seeing themselves as related. And often we don't do that work. You know, we just work away in our silos. And so the charter process for me is really a kind of coming together and seeing what we have in common, and then agreeing on those principles to move forward.
I was just like wondering how to make the charter more concrete, because that seems to be like a big question of like how does that call anyone to do something actually other than having those values. So that's another question that I have, I guess.
Well, this is where you need to, you know, mobilize people in particular communities around particular initiatives. So basically, you're right. Anything that you do could be done in the name of the charter, or could relate to the principles and values articulated in the charter. But so the important thing is to basically decide to do things, right? So, you know, you could kind of rehash the charter. You could do strategic planning on campus around some food systems targets, and I think that would be great. But there are probably immediately things that people want to do together to move something forward, whether it's, you know, depending on the priority on campus, it could be starting a garden, it could be community kitchen, it could be advocating for a food studies course, you know, who knows. So again, it's that kind of mix of like going where there's energy and then doing some planning so that you can be really strategic in moving things forward, intentional in moving things forward. And for different groups, you know, I think that on some campuses, you know, I see this in some communities across Ontario, there are people who want to do that sort of bringing together. It needs to happen, basically. You know, you need to bring farmers together with health people, together with planners and community agencies, because they've never been together. And that process is actually really exciting for them, and it results in a strong food charter. Other communities have a really strong practice of actually working collaboratively, and they're like, yeah, look at that charter. We agree with that. We can, you know, make some tweaks and endorse that in, you know, a couple of weeks, and let's get on to action. You know, what do we want to do in this community to make this reality, to translate this on the ground? And often they come up with ideas really quickly as well. So, you know, there's no shortage of things to do. So it's how do you identify priorities around the table, understanding that you won't be able to do everything at once. So at the Toronto Food Policy Council, you know, we endorsed our food charter 10 years ago, and then the food strategy 4 years ago. So we're constantly kind of revisiting the vision piece, but we're also trying to move concrete initiatives forward. So we want an urban agriculture policy for the City of Toronto. We had a community urban agriculture action plan endorsed by City Council. We also want, gardens on hydro corridors. We want new market gardens, new space for gardening in the city, and how can we facilitate those discussions. So you can see that there's sort of that planning piece, the policy piece, and the action piece all combined. And I think actually that is interesting to people, to see that there's action behind it. So while you're doing that planning and coordination and bringing people together, that kind of governance work, I also encourage you to, just choose sort of one initiative and go for it, or a couple, depending on how much energy you have around the table.
Thanks.
There was one question, Chris, that you asked from Carlton. I could jump in on that one, around the local, and what is local, and how do we improve the definition of locals? Because of course in the Ontario Food Act, it's true, or the Local Food Act, we do have a very broad definition of local. I think what's interesting about that act, if there is anything interesting at all, and I do think it's actually a step in the right direction, is that there's language around regional food systems. And that's the first time that we've had that language articulated. And that's actually really driving at OMAF a whole initiative around thinking about regional food systems planning, engaging municipalities in this work, and figuring out the jurisdictional relationships between the province and municipalities in relation to the food system. So, sometimes the language is really important. And I know Mo has really good ideas, Mo from Just Food in Ottawa, around kind of concentric circles of local. So you would first look for a product like asparagus locally, but of course asparagus will be local farther away from Ottawa before it's local in Ottawa, and having a set of decision-making tools that allow you to buy the asparagus when it becomes local around Ottawa first, before you buy Niagara asparagus. But still having access to that Niagara asparagus maybe 3 weeks ahead of time when it's available earlier. So I think that a lot of food systems mapping work can be done to support the regional food systems. What are the food assets that you have in your community? And you said that somebody has already done some of that work, mapped out all the places where good food is available in Ottawa, and then just making those linkages between food service. I don't know if you're working with food service, but a lot of that is just hard relationship building, bringing different people together, the food service provider and the farmer that can provide something. So I don't know if that helps, but that language around regional food systems, I think, is really strong, especially from the context of a campus, because you can begin to think about, what is your food shed at the campus level, and how do you really effectively engage farmers and food producers in that food shed to provide for the university.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent.
So, any other questions, or what haven't I talked about yet? Tell me.
Something that might be useful, Lauren, if you have some inspirational go-tos. Obviously, your articles that you've written up on the Toronto Food Policy Council are full of a wealth of information, but any things that you're looking towards where you see a lot of opportunity, or best practices, good practices that you're seeing out there that might be useful for all of us to get a pulse on?
Yeah, there's this new resource. I mean, it's more for cities, but universities are kind of like little cities, so I think you should check it out. Um, Called Growing Food Connections in the U.S. And I don't know if you know Samina Raja out of Buffalo, but she's done a lot of, she's a planner who works at the university there, and she's done so much great work around the food system. And they're compiling all sorts of food policies from across the U.S. So it's a little bit of a different context, but I find it's a great resource. The other resource that I love around procurement is this Copenhagen. Do you guys know it? This Copenhagen, it's like the food kitchen or something. Anyways, it's their student. It's for kids in elementary and high school, but they have a really good local food procurement policy there. They procure almost 95% of their food is local, that's served in the cafeterias for kids in schools. And beyond that, what they've done is they have this incredible focus on like eating together, sharing food, food literacy. It's just a really amazing program, and I think it's kind of like the gold star for school food. And I would include like campus, like institutional food, basically institutional food procurement. Just that combination of the real attention to procurement, but also making eating food together special, and you know, paying attention to that and the way it happens in an institutional setting. So you can check that out online.
Totally. Thanks so much. It's always good to hear stories from abroad to help inspire us.
I know, it's true, it's true. And that's the cool thing, especially around the food waste. I mean, I don't know, we're doing, I know several of you mentioned food waste. We're doing some work on it now too. It's a TFPC priority, and I can't believe it. Like, there are so many cool food waste initiatives out there that we can get inspiration from. So it's pretty exciting time, actually.
So exciting. Hopefully we can pass back some of the really exciting things that are happening on these campuses to you guys.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, I know I sit right next to Ryerson University. Like my office is in the building basically on Ryerson's campus. And I just feel like the things that are happening with well, Ryerson Food Service, but the students on the campus are so exciting. We went on a tour of the rooftop garden. They have this World Crops project. They have a farmers market, food trucks. It's really amazing to see what is happening, and so I'm just really appreciative. I can imagine all of these things happening in campuses across the country, and then you think about you know, people graduating and going to different communities and expecting or driving that change in the communities where they're living.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. Does anyone else have final questions or comments or anything exciting to share? Okay. Well, we're on the hour, so thank you so much for filling up so much in that short amount of time. I've jotted some notes down, and then we'll have this recording to keep on hand, and definitely will pass this along to everyone who wasn't able to make it. But thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for all the great work. I feel like I've only scratched the surface of the incredible things that are happening across the country. Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Lauren. Thanks so much.